Hey everybody, welcome back to Conquest of Ea, and today we're going to go over the Old Dominion and how they're going to start to work in Conquest, The Last Argument Kings 2.0. And as you can see from the slideshow on the video, these models are just amazing, like the undead Roman aesthetic. It's a miracle I don't own an entire army of these guys already, especially with these new like statue things coming out, as well as the new other unit. I think they have like axes and stuff that just got previewed, although I don't have a picture of them in the video yet. So before in 1.5, these guys were really strong and tough to play around. They were also a tougher army to play. They kind of got toned down a little bit in 2.0, but they're still very good, especially with some of their newer units that are coming out to flesh out the faction. And so first we'll take a look at the army's special rules, which this army has more special rules that you just get for playing Old Dominion than a lot of the other factions in the game, which makes it a little more complicated, you know, for your newer player coming in to just pick up this faction and play, which I think this is one of the more popular factions in the game just because of how amazing these models look, and, you know, who doesn't like undead Romans, basically. You get a few special rules for just playing Old Dominion. And first, you're going to get Animate Vessel, and this will be a keyword that's going to be on each of the regiments or characters if they have it. And it gives you Terrifying 1, which is awesome, so subtracting the Resolve characteristic when you make your opponent take Resolve tests by 1. But it also means that your unit can't take the Inspire action, so it can't freely, you know, of your own choice, take the Inspire action, but it can receive the benefits of being inspired if you charge. So you'll still get that +1 clash when charging, which is pretty good. It also means, and a lot of people are familiar with this if they've ever played Old Dominion before, that your units, when you get hit, don't take morale tests and don't have to take resolve tests. So they don't have a resolve characteristic, and that's kind of what makes this army pretty tanky, because you're getting rid of basically half the damage that other factions in the game have to take after, you know, getting clashed and attacked. Then you're taking the resolve, which I'm sure all of us, me playing my 100 Kingdoms, if you know you don't have a character in that unit to buff the resolve, or not enough stands in that unit, the resolve test can really hurt if you take a bunch of wounds. A lot of the Old Dominion units get something called Memories of Old, and it's additional special rules that you'll see if you're in the army builder, which we'll take a look at a little later at some of the units. Different abilities, draw events, and actions that they can take that'll give them certain buffs depending on what the unit is. So at first, the Memories of Old is a combat or out of combat action. So instead of inspiring, this is kind of what you can do. Instead of inspire clash, you can use Memories of Old clash, Memories of Old volley, something like that. But you also have something that is called the Dark Power Pool, which I'm just going to skip down here. When you're playing a 2,000 points battle, you're going to get a token for every time a full stand of your models are killed. And as you can see, you go up to tier 2 when you have 8 to 16 tokens, tier 3, 17, 21 tokens, and you can get up to 22 plus tokens to get to tier 4. And as you go into those higher tiers, you get more benefits. So tier 2, if you look down on the next page of the rules, all the regiments can use their Memories of Old as a draw event instead of an action. So this allows you to resolve the draw event. Just remember, you can only resolve one draw event per unit, you know, per their activation. So in some instances, if a unit has like Bastion or something like that that's not connected to their Memories of Old, you're going to have to make the decision of what you want to do, as far as, you know, maybe getting that +1 defense from Bastion or using your Memories of Old, which this kind of makes the army actually more fun to play in my mind, because it implements some planning that you need to do in order to get the most out of your Old Dominion units. And then if you bump into that tier 3, you can use your Memories of Old as a draw event and as an action, and you can stack them. Some of them can stack. So just remember, you know, per the base rules, if it's like Bastion with a 1 in the parentheses, and you get Bastion 1 in the parentheses again, those don't stack. It needs to say Bastion +1. So anything that can stack, and we'll take a look at some units that can. now once you get to tier 3, you can do a draw event and action Memories of Old and stack up some things to make your units even better. So if you play with the Fallen Divinity, I've played against her, you're actually using the Fallen Pantheon instead of the Dark Power Pool, and you can read those yourself just going over to the Bellum website to see kind of what she does. She is a whole separate way to play the Old Dominion faction and kind of deserves her own video because she changes the way your Dark Power Pool works. She is so many points, she's going to be the focus of your army. So this video is really just going to focus on the Old Dominion, kind of playing without her for now. Alright, now that we've gone over some of the special rules, we'll go over Warband that you actually get in the one-player starter set. And if you're looking to get into Old Dominion or into Conquest in general, I am affiliated with Frontline Gaming, and they sell a bunch of Conquest miniatures over on their web store, which there'll be a link below in this video at a 15% discount if you use my affiliate link in the description of the video below. So the Warband that I made is actually what you get in the Old Dominion one-player starter set. And the character you're going to get is the Archimandrite, and he is a spellcaster for the Old Dominion that can be buffed pretty heavily to cast like up to 3 times, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, healing, throughout the entire game in 2.0 got scaled down, and the Archimandrite is no exception to that. But he can still be an effective healer, and with his ability to cast twice through the first thing he can use is if he's your Warlord, uses Supremacy ability. He can perform 2 spell casting actions each round for free for just the whole game. And then once per battle, he can re-roll any number of dice when performing a spell casting action. This is a pretty good Supremacy ability. We'll take a look at the other characters that you don't get in the one-player starter set you might want to pick up to start that second Warband and their Supremacy abilities, but this is pretty good just being able to cast twice, but there is another way to cast twice with some upgrades you can put on him. So you'll see he comes in at 100 points. He's Priest 6, which is pretty good, because I know my 100k Theus Priest just starts at Priest 5, and through a retinue you can buff him up to Priest 7. He has the Animate Vessel on Terrifying 1 and Devout. And with that Devout, which is pretty cool, the unit that he goes into will count as 1 automatic success when he's trying to cast any prayers on his own unit. So the spells that he gets, first we'll look at Hazlia's Touch, which is an oldie but a goodie. It's been toned down a little bit as far as the healing, and you'll see you need attunement 3 to cast it, so it's a little more difficult than just your regular 2 attunement spells to cast. And the target friendly regiment is going to heal 1 plus X amount of wounds, where X is the current tier of the Dark Power Pool. So this could be, if you're in tier 3, you could heal 4 wounds, but if you're just in that tier 1, you're healing at least 2 wounds, which is enough to bring back like a stand of Legionnaires. So this isn't terrible, it's just a little harder to cast, but you can be up to that Priest 7, which isn't that bad at all. He has Dark Immolation as well, and it's going to give a unit attunement 3 scaling range 8, so it's a little harder to cast again, but it's going to give the Aura of Death plus X special rule, where X is the current tier of the power pool. And then you'll see that it's plus Aura of Death, and there are ways to give your other units that he's with Aura of Death already, so you can kind of start stacking this up, where being in close combat with the Old Dominion units can really hurt your own units. Like, you might not be hurting them a ton because they don't take Resolve, and they might not be hurting you a ton because their units aren't super great in close combat, just a regular unit of Legionnaires, for example, or the Praetorian Guard even. But that Aura of Death is going to start to hurt the longer you sit there with them. His next power is Blasphemous Power. And that worked out. I said power twice. And you pick a unit, and that unit counts the Dark Power tier 1 higher than it is. It can't go up to tier 4 unless you have the Strategos or the Ziliarch as your Warlord, which we'll talk about each of those characters in a couple minutes here. And if you're already at the highest power tier, you're going to get Decay 2 and Flurry. This is, you can cast twice with the Archimandrite if you build him right. So, I'm not going to say you'll never cast the spell, because being able to double up some of your Dark Power, your Memories of Old, can be pretty good. And last, you have the nice, just little magic missile of Unholy Baptism, range 12, 3 scaling, and 1 hit per success. and with armor piercing 1. And your Archimandrite can throw a bunch of dice, and also by buffing up his retinue can get auto successes. So this can put out a bunch of shots basically with Archimandrite. Some of the interesting things, his retinue for Arcane is pretty standard, but some of the interesting Dark Blessings he can take, just for 15 points, he gets to reroll results of 6 when spellcasting, which that's not bad at all, especially if you're going to be rolling 7 dice. Statistically, you're rolling at least 1 6 in there each time. And I don't even know how to say this, but you're going to get the Dark Shepherd draw event. And I'm kind of torn on this one, because you can select a stand and kill it, and that's going to add to your dark power pool, but you're killing stands. I mean, if you do this over the whole game, you're just killing stands, which your opponent's going to be doing for you anyway, so I don't know if I would ever take this. And last, for 40 points, if you don't make him the Warlord, if he casts a spell with 4 more successes, then he gets another free spellcasting action. Still can't cast the same spell more than twice, but if you buff him up with this, let's see how many points it is. If you give him this, oh man, was that not what I was looking at? Dark Blessings. Unholy Mastery, and you give him the 3 tiers of Arcane. So he gets the 1 failed success as a 1 failed casting attempt as a success. He goes up to almost 200 points to cast twice. I don't know if that's worth it because a lot of your units are already expensive, and you could just make him the Warlord to cast twice. You probably still want the Arcane 3, but then that's saving you the whole 40 points in that. So all in all, the Archimandrite's a really good spellcaster. Obviously, he does want to get caught out in any duels, because you can, as Old Dominion, just because you don't take Resolve, you can still be broken and shattered. So he likes to be in those bigger units of like Legionnaires and stuff like that, buffing them up and really making a huge speed bump type unit for your opponent. But the way to call him out is dueling him, and then, you know, you've got a choice to make if you're the Old Dominion player if you want to fight a close combat character with this guy. A basic troop for Old Dominion is their Legionnaires, and just looking at their stat lines, you might not be very impressed for the 120 point price tag. Defense 1, Evasion 1, having that 1 pip of evasion is pretty nice, just because that's always, you know, 16% chance they could live. But then that's kind of expensive for other, like Men-at-Arms have defense 2 built in with their shield, and a way to get Bastion to get up to that defense 4, and they're 105 points for 3 stands. But thankfully, the Old Dominion, you know, come in with some of those special rules that we talked about before to make this unit definitely worth it. First off, right off the bat, you're not taking resolve tests in combat, so that's like half of the damage coming into the unit that you don't even need to worry about. And as you can see, they have the Terrifying 1, which is pushing more damage through than these, you know, their Clash 2 attacks would normally create. And they have Shield, and their Memories of Old is to get Phalanx, so they can get up to that Defense 3, which is nice. And so the Phalanx, this regiment counts as defenses 1 point higher for all hits coming in that's front arc. I thought that was supposed to be all arcs, but I guess not. And furthermore, this regiment, you can't benefit from Inspire, but it doesn't matter, you can't Inspire anyway. And you can only charge the 5 plus 3 inches, so up to 8 inches. And as far as some of the command and officer models that you can get for the Legionnaires, and these are going to be some of the same that you can put in the Praetorian Guard as well in that 1-player starter set. First you get the Icon Bearer, which I actually like for 10 points. The command stand with this officer, it's got to be the last stand to be removed as a casualty, but when it's removed you get an additional power token. Okay, actually now that I read that, I don't like this. I just changed my opinion right on the fly, I guess, and here's why. So this means the unit is dead, so then you've already gotten at least 3 little pips on your power tokens because the unit's at least 3 stands, so really a 4th not really getting you anything, I guess. You need to be at that 8 power tokens to get to tier 2 anyway. So let's get rid of the Icon Bearer. Now if you played Old Dominion, you know, since 1.5 and you've played a bunch of games and you love the Icon Bearer, I could definitely be swayed, so let me know down in the comments if this is something you always take, like on your Legionaries. The Standard Bearer for them is only 10 points, which is nice. And then their officers is when the units get pretty interesting, because as you can see they have 4 options, which is more than most units in the game. And I really like the Profane Reliquary that gives them the Aura of Death +1. And like we talked about before, the Archimandrite can give them Aura of Death plus whatever the tier for the power pool currently is. They can also take a Dark Cenotaph, and the command stand counts as 2 stands of the same types for seizing objective zones. I really like this. It's just I don't know if I would take it over the Profane Reliquary. They're both 25 points, because if you're sitting on that objective and you have 6 stands of Legionnaires, then you're already sitting there with 6 stands of medium unit on there. So I don't know if you need a 7th, basically. The Acolyte lets you always count as being within range of a friendly priest, which is pretty cool. But the Archimandrite has a range of like 8 inches for a lot of his spells and stuff like that. So I don't know if they need this, and a lot of times Archimandrite's going to be living in a big unit of Legionnaires anyway. And last you have the Optio, where they get the Vanguard special rule. This is pretty good, definitely on some other units that we'll take a look at a little later. So next we'll take a look at the carries. They are a light infantry unit, 160 points you can see, which is pretty expensive. But the reason they're 160 points is because they have Barrage of 3 for each stand, as well as they have the Priest special rule, and they count as, you can see down below their Memories of Old, when they're doing a spellcasting action, you pick 1 stand, and you count it as Priest level 1 per stand, and their Memories of Old lets them get Priest +1 per stand. So if they take the action Memories of Old, if they're close enough to do their spells already, they'll get Priest 2 per stand. Or if they, you're higher up in that Dark Power pool and they can draw event Priest +1 and action +1, they could be Priest 3 per stand. And the spells they get are pretty interesting. One is Drain Will, and if you get 1 to 4 successes, you're reducing the target enemy regiment's defense by 1, which is awesome. And then if you get 4 or more successes, they're also going to take 1 additional hit until the end of the round from Aura of Death, which we saw how we could stack some Aura of Death with Archimandrite and Legionnaires earlier. And their other spell, Insanity, it starts out at range 10 attunement 2, just 2 hits per success. So you can get a bunch of hits on an enemy unit. They don't cause resolve tests like normal spells do, but the opponent doesn't take their defense saves. They have to take their lowest unmodified resolve characteristic inside that regiment as their save. But then when you get to tier 2, any rolls of 6 that your opponent rolls for those resolve saves count as 1 additional wound. And if you're in tier 3, then they also have to take morale test after they take the wounds from there. So this can be, a nice little damage poking spell in the beginning, but when you get up to power tier 3, this can be absolutely devastating. I can see how this would be tough to get the unit to cast this at tier 3, just because these are your units that are lights. They're on the table first. They're a little faster with the move 6. They're usually out there in front of your army doing stuff, so they'll probably die first, unfortunately. The next unit we're going to look at is the other little ghost guys in the Mori. And you can see here they have Fluid Formation, which is a really awesome rule in Conquest in general. Aura of Death 2, they get the Animate Vessel and Terrifying 1. And you'll see that they have a couple spells, but they don't have a Priest level. They have to use their Memories of Old to get Priest +1 per stand. Or they can use their Memories of Old to get Cleave 1. With 6 attacks per stand, that Cleave 1 could be really, really awesome if you get in there and you're higher in the tiers from the power pool. But their spells are actually pretty interesting as well. Translocation lets them make a free 8-inch march, and ignoring, you can teleport through any terrain or regiments that are in front of you. You have to end in a legal position, but you can still use it while you're engaged, and you can move sideways or backwards without having your march characteristic. So that's a pretty cool little trick you can pull. If you're engaged with this unit and you want to pull a little okey doke on your opponent and teleport these Mori somewhere else and charge them with something that's activating later in the round, that would be pretty cool to pull off. And then they also have Immolation, which is a way that they can up their Aura of Death by how well they cast the spell. They are 180 points, which kind of hurts. Like, as you can see, everything's pretty expensive in this army. So while your carries and Mori are like kind of throwaway units, nothing in this army is really a throwaway unit, I guess. These are your units that are going to be out there first since they're lights, and just with the evasion 2 and 4 wounds, it's kind of easy to kill them, unfortunately. And the last unit you're going to get inside that one-player starter set is the Praetorian Guard. And at 160 points, they're a little more elite as far as your medium infantry go. But you can see that they still have that terrifying 1, but they have defense 2 with shield and Bastion +1 as memories of old. And with that +1, that means when you get up there in the higher tiers of the Dark Power, they'll be able to use it as a draw event and an action to get Bastion +2, giving these guys, maximum defense they can get is 5, which is awesome. They can take the Standard Bearer and the Icon Bearer, just like the Legionnaires, and then they can take the Profane Reliquary, which I really like, to give them the Aura of Death. They can also take the Dark Cenotaph for a little bit of extra stands when you're holding an objective zone. These guys are really, really strong. A big block of these, when you've already lost some of your carries and Moris, can be super hard to remove from the table with that defense 5. And a couple of the other characters that you can pick up in the Strategos and the Ziliarch. The Strategos, as you can see, has the shield, Animate Vessel, and Terrifying 1. And he's a medium infantry character that has a Supremacy ability. So he lets you, him and the Ziliarch also actually let you reach the tier 4 of the Dark Power pool. And once per battle, you can activate his Supremacy ability, and you can count all regiments in your army's empowerment tier as 1 tier higher. And then each friendly regiment will perform a free additional reform or combat reform action during their activation. So this isn't terrible. Once per game benefit is pretty cool. But then if you look at the Ziliarchs, until the end of the round, all friendly regiments, you can perform a free clash action during their activation. And it allows them to also clash twice. Normally you can only do that once. I really like the Ziliarch's ability, but the Strategos giving everybody, bumping up 1 more tier in the power pool is really, really good as well. So both of these are more close combat and buffing character oriented through their treasures and dark blessings, and we'll just take a look at a couple of those that I think are really interesting. So first one is a banner that gives Aura Death +1 to the unit that the character's in. I feel like you can make a Aura Death bomb unit really, really easily with the Old Dominion. I think that's really, really going to be effective on the tabletop. So I would have this in basically all of my army lists. The Strategos can take some interesting ones. The Aura Malice I really like. It gives the character stand, or the regiment the character stands attached to Dread, which means the units that are in close combat with them can't be inspired, which is really, really good. That's 40 points, which is a little expensive. I also like Eternal Discipline, that gives the regiment Untouchable, which rerolls defense rolls of 6. Strategos inside of a unit of Praetorians with this would be extremely hard to kill. And I also like, not going to try and pronounce this word, but it's on there. It gives them bodyguards, the regiment 15 points, so your character can refuse duels, not make the unit broken. So that was my very quick overview of the Old Dominion army for Conquest 2.0. And after you kind of listen to that and get that 1-player starter set, you can see, I think it was 720 points just from the units with no upgrades. You're at a really good spot, and you can start to get units like that on the tabletop, which are really, really cool. So I think in the future, now that I've done a bunch of the factions, we're going to start doing the more advanced type videos of, taking the Fallen Divinity for Old Dominion, for example, of how that changes your army playstyle completely, and then the different ways that you can build certain armies. Like another example would be the 100 Kingdoms. Are you going to tech into a huge infantry list with the Imperial Officer, or are you going to move more into trying to make Household Knights amazing again with the Elephant's Roar, and what kind of different archetypes you can build in the lists. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I hope we get more and more Conquest players out there playing the game and getting into some events. I know the events page is like, I don't even know how many more events have been added to it. It's just out of control now. They just posted over on the Facebook, Bellum did, about March events, and there's just tons and tons of events popping off all over the world, which is awesome. And I just hope the game keeps growing because it's from such a great company, and I'm having a blast playing it, and I hope you are too.